I remember the exact moment when something inside me began to quiet, a subtle shift that almost slipped by unnoticed. It wasn't just my body. It was my entire being. The spark that once fueled my mornings, the pulse that moved me forward in every part of life, started to fade. At first, I blamed stress, the endless to-do lists, the pressures that seemed to crush any hint of enthusiasm. It's normal, I told myself. Everyone feels drained sometimes. But beneath that excuse, a small voice whispered that this was more than just fatigue or a rough week. It was as if a part of me was retreating, withdrawing behind walls I couldn't quite see or break down. This retreat wasn't just about sex. It wasn't solely about the fading desire that had once been raw and alive. It was about something deeper, my connection to life itself, to ambition, to the fire that had pushed me to create, to conquer, to be present. That vitality, the one that courses through every action with purpose, was slipping away. Yet I sat there, numb to the loss, wrapped in denial, as if the silence inside me was some kind of normal rhythm that I just had to accept. I found myself caught in a vicious loop. I tried to keep up appearances. Busy work, social obligations, distractions. But none of it filled the hollowness where my energy used to live. The evenings blurred together, less in passion, more in exhaustion. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. Not because of age or the lines life had etched, but because the fierce, dynamic spirit I once knew seemed muted. I felt like a guest in my own body, watching from a distance as my inner fire flickered weakly. One evening, I spoke candidly to a close friend, someone who's seen me at my best and my worst. "I don't know what's wrong," I confessed. "It's like the energy's just gone. It's not just about wanting sex anymore. I'm not even sure I want to do anything meaningful. I feel like I'm moving through life without really living it." There was no judgment in his eyes, just quiet understanding. "Maybe," he said softly, "it's telling you something deeper than the surface." That conversation stayed with me, gnawing at something I wasn't ready to face. For years, I had believed this fading desire was just an inevitable part of life's grind. It's stress, I told myself again, or just the way of getting older. But if that were true, why did it feel like a slow suffocation? Like an anthem being replaced with silence? The truth was, this diminishing drive, the pulse of vitality, was the body's honest signal that something fundamental was out of balance. I began to wonder what else I had ignored, what urgent messages I missed because I was too busy chasing a facade of success or numbing discomfort with distractions. Over time, habits built on convenience, late nights scrolling through streams of content, seeking quick bursts of pleasure, avoiding discomfort, had woven themselves into my daily routine. Each one small, each one seemingly harmless. But together, they formed a muted landscape where excitement and real connection no longer thrived. It was difficult to admit that the problem wasn't about adding more stimulation or forcing more effort. The more I pushed, the more depleted I felt. I was exhausting myself trying to reignite a flame that had been slowly suffocated, not by external pressures alone, but by an invisible weight pressing down inside. The hardest part was the silence, the absence of that deep craving that once made me feel alive, not just interested in survival, but in creating and expanding beyond mere existence. This silence was the first sign, a warning I had overlooked. What if the real issue wasn't about what I lacked, but what I allowed to overwhelm me? What if the steady erosion of my vibrant energy was the body's way of retreating from something unsafe within? That thought unsettled me, but it also sparked a flicker of curiosity. I realized I couldn't keep running from this loss or pretending it was normal or permanent. So here I am, ready to unravel this quiet desperation, ready to explore what it means when our deepest drive, the raw, primal force that connects us to life itself, begins to fade. This story is not about quick fixes or blame. It's an invitation to look beyond surface symptoms, to listen to the whispers of our own bodies and spirits, and to understand the real reasons behind this dimming light within us. If you've felt that too, if you've sensed your own fire dimming without knowing why, then you already know the weight of this experience. We're not alone in this. The path ahead isn't about chasing desire recklessly, but about discovering how to reclaim the parts of ourselves we never thought could fade, the parts hiding quietly beneath the noise of daily life. I want you to join me in this journey, not for answers handed down, but for truths uncovered and felt deep inside. Because what's lost isn't gone forever. It's waiting beneath the surface, ready to reemerge when we're willing to face the silence and understand what's been drowning out our own pulse all along. I remember sitting alone one late evening, the room dimly lit by the glow of a single lamp, when a wave of restlessness swept over me. Not the familiar agitation of stress, but a strange disconnect, like a vital wire had been unplugged somewhere inside. It was as if my usual compass pointed nowhere, leaving me adrift amid a fog of weariness. In that moment, I realized this was not a fleeting episode, but a signal that my inner landscape had shifted beneath the surface. What struck me was how subtle the process had been. It wasn't a sudden plunge but a gradual seepage, an erosion of natural enthusiasm for creation and engagement. Paradoxically, even when surrounded by people or immersed in activities that once thrilled me, a veil dulled my emotional palate. I noticed how experiences that used to ignite my spirit now felt diluted, like tasting food without savoring its flavor, or listening to music that no longer stirred a response. This detachment wasn't due to overt exhaustion but an invisible layer that had clouded my perception. During a rare morning walk, the crisp air stung my lungs, and I caught a glimpse of a sparrow tirelessly flitting between branches. It seemed so alive, so effortlessly connected to its environment. That tiny creature became a mirror reflecting what I'd lost. An unfiltered aliveness that allowed for risk, for vulnerability, for creating without restraint. I admired its freedom but also felt a pang of mourning for my own disconnection from this state of being. I started to question what external influences might be amplifying this internal blockade. Over time, I found that persistent exposure to constant digital noise, endless notifications, superficial social interactions, and a ceaseless stream of fleeting content had trapped me in a cycle of low-grade stimulation. The brain's craving for quick dopamine hits had replaced meaningful pursuits, leaving me chemically numbed. Amid the barrage of instant gratification, the deeper drive to invest energy in authentic growth shriveled, as if starved of real nourishment. One afternoon, during a rare pause from my habitual scrolling, I tried a simple experiment. I intentionally disconnected from all devices for several hours. At first, an uncomfortable restlessness stirred. My fingers twitched, aching for that habitual buzz of alerts. Yet gradually, an unexpected spaciousness emerged within me. With fewer distractions, I tuned in to my breath, the sounds of rustling leaves, the subtle cadence of my own heartbeat. It was as if a locked door inside me was gently creaking open, revealing dormant chambers crowded with forgotten hopes and raw potential. Around that time, a mentor shared a perspective that resonated deeply. True vitality emerges not from incessant doing, but from the capacity to sit in stillness and let suppressed sensations surface without resistance. This concept challenged everything I believed about productivity and worth. The idea that my inner energy required not just cultivation but also reclamation, removal of barriers that stalled its flow, began to take root in my understanding. Facing this reality sparked a flood of memories. Moments when I had numbed myself with convenience and avoidance rather than confront discomfort. I recalled the nights where exhaustion became an excuse to ignore the whispering ache for deeper connection or purpose. Recognizing these patterns felt like peeling layers of hardened bark away to reveal tender growth beneath, vulnerable yet promising. One evening, my partner noticed the change in me, sitting across the table with concerned eyes. "You seem distant," she said softly. "Not just tired, but like you're not here." Her words cut through my defenses. I confessed that it felt as if the part of me that loved fiercely and dreamed wildly was retreating into shadows. Her quiet presence reminded me that this journey wasn't solitary. It was okay to lean into support, to let others witness my unraveling and rebuilding. In the following weeks, I began experimenting with moments of intentional vulnerability. Rather than pushing through numbness, I allowed myself to experience the unease, the restlessness, the echoes of longing that surfaced. I journaled honestly, tracing back the threads of patterns that had drained my vitality. Each entry felt like shedding weight, a slow reclamation of a fragmented self. There was one night I'll never forget. After a long day of reflection, I sat outside under the vast sky. The stars blinked steadily, ancient and unwavering. I breathed deeply, feeling a subtle shift, as though currents of energy were aligning beneath my skin. The urge to create, to move, to strive was whispering again, softly, cautiously, but undeniably present. This rekindling, I realized, was not about forcing passion or slapping on masks of motivation. It was about nurturing an honest relationship with my own rhythms, shedding artificial distractions, and making space for real excitement to seep back in naturally. The path wasn't linear, but each step revealed new facets of resilience and authenticity. What had initially felt like a void was transforming into fertile ground, ripe with potential for reawakening. Now, consider how this applies when you face moments of despair or disconnection. What habitual patterns might be dulling your own inner fire? What small acts of stillness or reflection could begin to lift the fog? The journey toward reclaiming this vital energy asks us to listen not for the loudest voice but the faintest pulse beneath, a whisper signaling life eager to stir once more. There was a night when exhaustion was no longer a shapeless fog but a tangible weight pressing against my chest, making even the simplest breath feel burdensome. I found myself lying awake, eyes tracing the cracked patterns on the ceiling, grappling with a restlessness that refused to be soothed. It wasn't a physical ache but an emotional drought, as if my entire system had been drained of its most essential fuel. My mind swirled with unspoken questions, and amidst the quiet, I realized something profound. My energy wasn't merely low. It had been rerouted, siphoned off by subtle but powerful forces I hadn't allowed myself to see. My journey to reclaim vitality steered me toward an unexpected realization. I noticed how certain social dynamics were stealthily eroding my motivational reserves. For instance, I had fallen into patterns where approval from others became a proxy for my self-worth. I spent hours crafting an image meant to satisfy external expectations, only to return home feeling hollow, disconnected from my own desires. It dawned on me that this cycle functioned like a financial system where I endlessly withdrew energy to maintain illusions but never deposited anything authentic back into my well-being. The longer I banked on validation, the more bankrupt my enthusiasm grew. One afternoon, a conversation with a colleague sparked this awareness further. She mentioned feeling emotionally numb amid constant digital chatter and never-ending task lists. We exchanged stories about the toll of living in a world that values efficiency over essence. Her words struck a chord. It occurred to me that my decreasing drive wasn't an isolated experience but a widespread epidemic of misplaced priorities. We had become experts at multitasking and surviving deadlines, yet novices at listening to our inner rhythms, at honoring what truly energizes us. Digging deeper, I confronted the role of my environment. It wasn't solely about internal battles but also about the subtle energies swirling around me. From the sapping fluorescent lights at work to the unhealthy relationships that drained rather than uplifted. I began experimenting with altering external variables. Natural sunlight replaced artificial lighting, meals centered on whole, nutrient-rich foods instead of quick fixes, and social circles shifted toward genuine, nourishing connections. Each adjustment felt tiny on its own but accumulated like careful brushstrokes repainting a dull canvas. A crucial turning point arrived when I allowed myself to face discomfort head-on rather than seeking distractions. Instead of reaching for my phone or pushing through with caffeine, I sat with the unease, letting waves of anxiety and impatience wash over me without resistance. It surprised me how much texture those challenging emotions added to my experience. In learning to stay present with them, I discovered cracks where authentic longing could seep through, a kind of recalibration that made room for deeper passions previously buried under layers of apathy. Throughout this process, I began journaling nightly, not with tidy resolutions but as a raw outlet for my shifting moods and fractured focus. One entry after another revealed hidden patterns, moments where I sabotaged my own desires to avoid vulnerability, occasions when rest felt like surrender rather than nourishment. These writings became a mirror reflecting my fragmented energy, but also a map for navigating back to wholeness. Each page marked a step out of confusion toward clearer engagement with my true self. On a brisk morning walk that smelled faintly of pine, I crossed paths with a man in his 60s, his posture upright and eyes sparkling with unmistakable vitality. We started talking, and he shared how he cultivated what he called energetic stewardship, deliberate actions aimed at protecting and nurturing his reserves instead of mindlessly depleting them. His practices differed greatly from mine. Dynamic sun salutations instead of restless pacing, morning journaling instead of distracted feeds, mindful breathing to anchor presence rather than chasing fleeting pleasures. His example ignited in me a new sense of possibility, a roadmap grounded in wisdom and care rather than sheer willpower. Yet the most humbling lesson emerged when I accepted that energy doesn't operate like a machine to be forced on command. It's more like a delicate ecosystem that thrives through harmony and balance. When I tried to push myself harder, I would crack and falter. But when I listened deeply, aligned small choices with my authentic inclinations, and respected natural rhythms, my internal world pulsed with renewed vigor. It became clear that reclaiming enthusiasm required undoing subtle betrayals I had committed against my own needs, surrendering the myth of relentless hustle as a badge of honor. Now, I invite you to look closely at your surroundings and rituals. Where do you silently bleed energy in exchange for surface gains? Which habits quietly numb your vitality, masking avoidance as productivity? Recognizing these hidden drains is the first bold step toward reclaiming your spark. Because sometimes, the path forward isn't an escalated effort, but a gentle unwrapping of layers that have held you hostage. In peeling back the dulling influences, your natural ardor, long dormant, can begin to rise with astonishing clarity and force. The day I stumbled upon an old journal tucked away in a forgotten drawer, I didn't anticipate the encounter would unravel layers of my own buried resistance. Flipping through pages filled with youthful ambitions and raw hopes, I was struck by how vibrant and uninhibited the words appeared, so unlike the tired cadence of my present voice. It was as if a stranger was speaking to me, someone whose pulse beat with eagerness and defiance. At that moment, I recognized how much subtle surrender had seeped into my routine, how much of that original fire was concealed beneath obligations and subconscious retreats. This realization acted like an electric jolt, waking an ember deep inside. In the days that followed, I became acutely aware of the habitual armor I wore, layers composed of social conditioning, fear of judgment, and silent compromises I didn't admit even to myself. One morning, while preparing coffee in the quiet kitchen, a question rose plainly. When did I stop championing my own desires? The answer wasn't simple. It wove through missed opportunities and moments of self-denial, small exchanges where I chose safety over risk, acceptance over authentic expression. Recognition dawned that each concession had chipped away at the core energy I once carried effortlessly. Later, while navigating a crowded street, I caught sight of a street artist molding vibrant clay figures under a bright awning. His hands moved confidently, shaping chaos into form. Observing him, I was struck by the contrast between his flow and my own internal stagnation. His work was unpredictable, alive, and unmistakably personal. It suggested that vitality thrives when vulnerability meets courage, and that creation often requires surrendering control. The image lingered, haunting and inspiring all at once. That evening, during a walk in a nearby park, the hush of twilight invited reflection. A cool breeze stirred leaves scattered on the path, each one carried unpredictably, yet purposefully, by invisible currents. I realized how similarly my energy had been buffeted by forces I ignored: stressors, unnoticed habits, and the quiet depletion caused by expecting instant fixes to deeply rooted fatigue. The analogy struck me. Just as leaves cannot control the wind that directs them, I had relinquished responsibility over what shaped my vitality. Determined to reclaim some agency, I experimented with ritualizing moments of intentional disconnection. Before bedtime, I switched off electronic devices and lingered in stillness, allowing my gaze to soften as thoughts ebbed without chase. Initially, waves of irritation and impatience surfaced, but with practice, They translated into dialogues with my deeper self, questions and insights emerging like whispers caught from a gentle stream. These dialogues revealed contradictions I hadn't faced. The tension between yearning for momentum and fearing vulnerability, between craving connection and guarding wounds. One afternoon, an old friend noticed my quiet transformation and asked, "What's different about you? You seem less burdened, more present." I hesitated, then shared fragments of what I was facing, an unraveling of protective layers so hope could seep in again. She nodded knowingly. "That's brave," she said. "Most people get stuck, afraid of the rawness that follows tearing down walls." Her words encouraged me, reminding me that growth doesn't require perfection, only courage to confront discomfort. Still, setbacks emerged unexpectedly. There were mornings when the numbness returned with a vengeance, tempting me to slide back into old patterns of disconnection. One particularly gray day, after a restless night, I nearly surrendered to despair. Instead, I reached for an old sketchbook, a relic from a time when creativity overflowed unfiltered. As the charcoal traced lines over paper, an energy stirred, slow and hesitant but real. I realized creativity wasn't just an outlet, but a current connecting me to my essential life force, waiting to be reawakened through patient engagement. During conversations with a therapist, I explored how cultural narratives about masculinity had shaped my relationship to energy and desire. Many lessons hammered into me suggested that expressing vulnerability implied weakness, that relentless productivity equated to worthiness, and that questioning one's capacity was a personal failure. Deconstructing these long-held beliefs was painful yet liberating. Slowly, I started embracing an expanded understanding of strength, one where tenderness and openness coexisted with resolve and action. A breakthrough arrived unexpectedly on a chilly spring morning while hiking alone. As I reached a clearing bathed in golden light, the vastness of the sky overhead reminded me how insignificant my doubts appeared against such expansiveness. It was a moment of clarity. Energy wasn't a finite resource to exhaust, but a living ecosystem requiring nourishment, rest, and honor. Breath by breath, I felt layers lifting, renewed possibility flowing into spaces I never thought would heal. Now, consider how this applies when you confront your own energy deficits. What unspoken narratives or inherited beliefs might be suffocating your drive? What small acts of honoring your inner landscape could gently unshackle you from those bindings? This path demands patience, compassion, and a willingness to meet your shadows without fear. In embracing this intricate dance, vitality begins to weave itself anew, intricate and powerful, both delicate as a whispered secret and robust as a river carving stone. Reflecting on this journey so far, I find myself standing at a delicate crossroads where the threads of my inner experience intertwine like a complex tapestry woven from invisible fibers. Each nuance, each subtle shift encountered along the way, contributes to a rising current beneath the surface. An energy that is neither abrupt nor loud, yet undeniably present, urging me toward a deeper rhythm. There is a certain paradox in this. The very spaces where I once perceived absence now seem pregnant with latent possibility, quietly humming with a vitality that defies straightforward explanation. In moments of stillness, I sense an undercurrent stirring within, a force shaped not by external commands or frantic pushing, but by a gradual harmonizing of disparate elements inside me. This harmonization unfolds organically, resembling a symphony where every note finds its place in a slowly emerging composition. The contrasts that once seemed irreconcilable, the tension between retreat and advance, between vulnerability and strength, begin to converse, revealing layers of meaning previously veiled by habit and distraction. As I sit with this internal dialogue, I realize that the energy I seek is not summoned from thin air. It arises from a tender attention paid to what has long been overlooked or suppressed. A vivid image comes to mind: a forest after rain, where every leaf and branch glistens with renewed life, reflecting light in a spectrum of unexpected hues. The ground, softened and yielding, invites seeds buried beneath to awaken and push upward, not in haste, but through a patient persistence. Like that forest, I recognize that my own resurgence depends less on urgent exertion and more on cultivating fertile conditions where spontaneity and authenticity can grow. This revelation carries with it a gentle invitation, not to conquer or annihilate obstacles by sheer force, but to engage with them as vital parts of a living ecosystem within me. There were days when frustration attempted to cloud this emerging clarity, when old urges to mask discomfort with busyness urged me into restless activity. Yet the unfolding awareness taught me that the movement needed is nuanced, a delicate dance where restraint and motion coexist. Just as a river carves its way by yielding to the geometry of the land it traverses, so must I respect natural contours of my inner landscape, flowing around blockages instead of battering against them. This does not signify passivity but a conscious recalibration, an artful navigation crafted from intuition and embodied wisdom. I recall a late afternoon conversation with someone whose presence felt deeply grounded, someone who listened with eyes that held no judgment, only an invitation to be genuinely seen. Our dialogue navigated unspoken territories, how loss and renewal are entwined aspects of growth, how silence between words often carries as much weight as speech itself. That encounter became a mirror reflecting fuller possibilities of connection not only externally but within the deepest chambers of my own being. It revealed that reclamation is as much about surrendering to what cannot be controlled as it is about cultivating intentional action. As this internal shift gathered momentum, I noticed subtle changes outside myself. The air seemed clearer, colors richer, and even familiar spaces took on new textures. Moments that used to pass unnoticed now sparked flickers of interest, an alignment between perception and presence that felt like rediscovering the world through a lens freshly cleaned. This growing attunement, however fragile at times, served as a compass, reminding me that the restoration of vital energy involves a reawakening of curiosity and receptivity as much as resolve. There is an undeniable vulnerability in acknowledging these dimensions, a willingness to remain open to uncertainty and the unknown contours of self. Yet within that openness lies a potent strength, a capacity to hold the full range of experience without recoiling or disowning parts once deemed inconvenient or diminished. It is within this embrace of complexity that transformation begins to pulse, weaving threads of renewal through what once seemed fragmented or lost. So here I stand, sensing a quiet threshold where the accumulation of insights and moments of self-honesty converge, preparing me for a new chapter yet unwritten. The air is thick with expectancy, a call to meet what emerges with gentle courage and unwavering compassion. Though the horizon remains flexible, shifting beyond immediate sight, I am neither rushed nor paralyzed, held instead within the steady rhythm of growth unfolding in its own time. And as I breathe into this liminal space, I invite you to reside with me there, poised on the edge of what is becoming, ready to step forward when the moment arrives. In the quiet moments when I finally allowed myself to listen, to truly listen, I discovered that what seemed like loss was actually a redirection, a subtle invitation from my body and soul to step back and heal. The dimming of my drive was not merely an absence but a call to pause, to reevaluate the landscape of my inner world and the forces shaping it. It was as if a veil was lifting, revealing not emptiness but concealed reservoirs of strength and yearning waiting patiently for acknowledgement. This awakening did not burst forth in a blaze but materialized as a gentle unfolding, a slow reclaiming of what had been shadowed by years of distraction, avoidance, and unspoken fears. I remember sitting by a window one afternoon, watching rain trail down the glass in unpredictable rivulets, and realizing how life, like those streams, doesn't always rush forward in neat lines. Sometimes it meanders, gathers, and breaks apart before joining a greater flow. My desire for life, for purpose, for connection was no different. Its seeming retreat was actually a part of a natural rhythm, inviting me to cultivate patience, softness, and a kind of reverence toward my own limits. This balance, elusive in the chaos of daily demands, holds transformative power because it honors the whole of our experience, the light and shadow in equal measure. Throughout this time, I learned to see my body not as an adversary or a machine to be controlled, but as an eloquent translator of my deeper state, a living compass signaling where alignment was missing. It whispered truths I ignored, that relentless striving without authentic rest corrodes energy, that surrendering to vulnerability can open doors to resilience, and that reclaiming vitality often requires dismantling the very defenses I trusted to protect me. Each heartbeat was an invitation to dialogue with myself, a reminder that life's pulse thrives when met with curiosity and compassion rather than judgment or force. My transformation took on the quality of a pilgrimage, less about grand gestures than the accumulation of tender acts, turning off screens to welcome silence, walking barefoot on cool grass to reconnect to earth, allowing tears to fall unashamedly during moments of release. These seemingly small rituals became sacred offerings to myself, affirmations of worth that bypassed my mind's critical narrative. It was in these spaces of surrender and presence that I found a wellspring of energy, not manufactured through willpower, but emerging organically from trust, wholeness, and acceptance. Along this path, encounters with others became mirrors reflecting both my shadows and my light. Conversations carried new weight, the sharing of fears, struggles, and hopes no longer hidden behind facades. Vulnerability ceased to be a liability. It transformed into a bridge reaching across isolation, reminding me of our shared humanity. In witnessing others' journeys and allowing mine to be seen, I stepped into a lineage of collective strength, woven from stories of falling, rising, and re-engagement with what animates the human spirit. One night, sitting beneath a canopy of stars, I whispered aloud my gratitude for this ongoing evolution. I acknowledged how the fading that once terrified me was actually the clearing away of debris, creating space for something richer and more sustainable to grow. That moment embraced a paradox I now hold close. True power lives not in domination or endless striving, but in the courage to embrace cycles of ebb and flow with grace and presence. It is a dance lived in harmony with ourselves and the world around us, delicate yet relentless, vulnerable and unyielding all at once. Now, when the urge to question or doubt arises, I remind myself that decline and renewal are two sides of the same coin. To engage fully with this truth is to invite resilience and authenticity to flourish. This journey invites us all, not to chase the elusive promise of constant vitality, but to cultivate a dynamic equilibrium where desire and rest, movement and stillness coexist with integrity. It asks for gentle persistence, a willingness to listen deeply to internal signals, and an openness to reclaiming a life animated by genuine passion rather than compelled by obligation. If you find yourself at a crossroads where the quiet has grown uncomfortable, where momentum seems lost amidst noise and routine, I invite you to pause, to welcome the discomfort as a teacher, an unspoken guide pointing you toward your own inner landscape. Within this invitation lies the potential not only for restoration but for an expansive transformation that touches every corner of your being. Here, in the interplay of surrender and awakening, we may rediscover not just our lost drive but the profound aliveness waiting patiently beneath, ready to course through us once more.